dollar bill, yo. Cash rules everything around me. Cream, get the cash rules everything around me. Cream, get the
What up, everybody in the house? We so glad you're here. My name is Shammy D, and we back for another edition of The Bundle with your one and only host, Marcos Rivera, and three illustrious guests to help your pricing game. Listen, I'm going to hand it off to the man of the hour. Everybody make some noise behind your screen for Marcos Rivera!
Yo, Shammy D, thanks for you bring the A game every single time, man. Thanks for coming in and doing that intro. And welcome everyone to the next episode of The Bundle. I'm Marcos Rivera, author and founder and CEO of Pricing.io. And today's guest, they are going to make an epic show today. Here's one of the key things that we do here at The Bundles. We try to curate the select best thought leaders in SaaS B2B pricing to break things down for you. And so today's guest, I was just giddy with joy and smiles and laughter before getting on here. All right, guys. So I'm going to start introducing the flow, and then we're going to get into the show. We're going to start off with Johnny Chang. Johnny is the VP of Growth and Operations at ClickUp, mega successful SaaS company. He was also former head of pricing at Marketo and Coupa, other mega successful companies. You catching on to a trend here. And he has over 10 years experience in product marketing. Johnny, welcome to The Bundle.
Thank you.
Dude, I met Johnny back in my days in back when I was at Vista, right? Where
way back. Over 11 years, I think. Way back.
Dude, oh my God. And so I think of you as one of the smartest folks in pricing. I also think of you as the only man who keeps coming to San Diego and not inviting me to tacos. The only man, right?
Next one. I promise. Next one. I promise.
I got to call you out, man. But thanks for being here. And let me move on to Mackenzie Kremer, or Mac. Mac is here with us. He's a senior manager at K1 Operations, uber successful private equity firm. And I know a thing about successful private equity firms. K1 is top of that list. He also was with Large Law Pricing, also big entrepreneur at heart, being part of that Center for Entrepreneurship. But Mac, I want to welcome you to the show.
Thanks for having me, Marcos. And just so you know, I go back to the same taco spot in San Diego every time I'm down there. So
you see, Johnny, this is a smart man. Yes, the glasses come in here. He's giving you the specs. He went to tacos with me and he loved it. So note for you, taco.
Wait, which taco spot?
Yeah, we went to Puestos, right?
Puestos. Yeah, Puestos.
Yeah.
Okay.
Puestos.
Award-winning
legit.
tacos.
Filet mignon tacos. That's all I got to say. Filet mignon.
That sounds amazing.
So thank you for being here, Mac. And we have, to round up everyone here, Sam Lee, head of pricing strategy and operations at a small company called Snowflake, if you may have heard of them. He also was running pricing at ServiceNow, Infoblox, other teeny tiny small companies, if you've heard of them. He also spent a lot of time at Microsoft in product. Sam Lee, welcome to The Bundle.
Thanks for having me, Marcos. I guess I'm getting me hungry because you talks about tacos. Good, my goodness.
I know you like good tacos, man. We also met a while back. Actually, back when I was at Vista as well, and yes, you were
that's right.
Killing it then. I'm super glad I got to know you. And I also am very glad that you got the memo to put very expensive, nice audio headsets on. That's fantastic, man. No, thanks for being here. And you guys, I wanna really unpack good sound topics in this show because there are a lot of SaaS operators, a lot of leaders, a lot of entrepreneurs listening, watching, and we need to break it down and tell them the truth about how this stuff works. And you all know how it really works. So let me also introduce how this show is structured. We could talk about topics all day long and riff, but I think there's big things that people like to talk about, and I'd like to add a little fun spin to it. I like to call this the pricing pyramid. And what I'm doing here is let's go ahead and make pricing a little more approachable, a little more fun. Let's play a little game show style. So we're going to choose a question from this list of 6. And each question is hidden behind a 90s hip hop jam. Why? Because it's pretty damn fun. And it goes along with the theme of my book, Street Pricing. But nonetheless, I like to have a little fun with it. So who's going to go first? I like to play a fun little game here and think about, our headquarters are here in San Diego. So who is going to be the closest to San Diego? I'm going to add a little bit of a different twist to this time, though. Instead of where you are today, where is your company's headquarters at? And then so we'll say, based on your headquarters, whoever's closest to San Diego wins. Okay. So I'll start with you, Sam. Sam, where's Snowflakes? Where's the HQ, man?
We went to no HQ, right? But the C suites were all in Bozeman, Montana.
Bozeman, Montana. All right, I'm going to anchor you down, man. Bozeman, Montana. All right, Johnny, where's ClickUp? Where are they?
I feel like you set this up for me because ClickUp is in San Diego.
Oh my!
Yeah, we are in San Diego. We are overlooking the Padres Stadium, and so I am probably as close to you as you can get. So
yes, I can throw a rock and hit you guys right now. So
yeah.
You are in San Diego. Mac, where is K1's core headquarters?
Beautiful Manhattan Beach, just outside of Los Angeles. So I really thought I was going to be the winner here, and then I completely forgot ClickUp was in San Diego. So
that's exactly it. But we'll do it this way, man. So Johnny will start, Mac, you'll come in second, and then Sam will round us with third. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to let you, Johnny, look at all these 6 topics on the pyramid, and you're going to pick one, and then we're going to reveal it, and let's talk about that in price.
Let's go with number 1. Let's go with PLG till infinity.
PLG till infinity. This is how we chill. This is a really big question to start opening things up, because companies right now are thinking about, how do we reduce CAC? How do we get more lead flow in? How do we think about ways to continue to grow? How should companies think about adopting PLG? And when I think about that, I'm expanding it a little bit to say, look, not every company is really set up really well for PLG. I'll give you kind of my point of view there. Johnny, I feel like this was tailor-made for you. I swear we did not talk about this beforehand, everybody. This is all organic. But Johnny, I got to ask you, man, when companies are thinking about a PLG motion, how should they approach it? What are the first kind of things to tackle, or, should they even be doing it?
Yeah. I get this question a lot, and just so the audience has some context. So I'm at ClickUp right now, and we are one of the hottest, fastest growing PLG companies right now. And a lot of other companies, especially young startups, kind of, look to our playbook to understand how to do PLG, right? I get this question a lot from a lot of, older companies that are traditionally think of as like B2B enterprise SaaS. They're like, hey, we've been hearing about all this PLG stuff. Like, how do we go PLG? You're right, Marcos. It's like, it's not just about like turning on a switch and all of a sudden the next day you're PLG. Like, you have to have, a lot of virality in your product. You have to be able to see value very fast, very easily. You also have to be able to, almost have like a self-serve motion, right? When they're picking up their product, they have to know how to use it. They have to know how to get to that value very quick, And so I talk to companies that are like, it takes, 6 months to onboard. They need like a whole, like outside third-party services team and all this implementation. And they're like, how do you go PLG? I was like, you can't. Like, that's not possible for you, right? So
no, not even going to take you 6 months of heavy lifting and configurations and all kinds of trainings and, unpleasantries that go with, rolling out, heavy software. But now let's talk about those that maybe are on the fringe. Like maybe it takes a couple weeks to get going, right? Like maybe they're in a dangerous, like striking distance to be able to do something. What do you tell those guys?
Yeah, I would actually say PLG is actually one of those things that's actually really easy to test, right? And so, you throw up a, trial, or you throw up some sort of pricing page online and just get a gauge for, how companies are taking this, right? And so it's actually very easy to test. The thing that I also will tell them is that, like, once you start finding that fit, you also have to probably tailor your product as well. And I think a lot of people don't really realize that. You have this, big, heavy, bulky product that can be made into a much lighter version that is more aligned to PLG. And so oftentimes what I tell them is test it out, but then also make sure that there's like a product that actually fits that go-to-market motion. So
Exactly. And I think it takes more than just a screen where you can activate a user, or a screen where you can, determine how many drop downs you need. Like, it's actually the experience behind it. And the way I always look at it is, when you're pricing something, you're pricing an experience, not just a product. And so PLG is that big experience. Now, here's the thing, right? If you're a company and say you're testing it, you like what you see, people are coming in, they're finding some value, and then they're able to kind of now want to take the next step in the journey and open things up and go deeper, this is where I warn, and you know a lot more about this than I do, about the operational, the wrapper around PLG, right? And so once you config and start updating the product, like you said, there's other stuff in the organization you got to do to really support like a PLG motion all the way and no half stepping, right? What are some of the things you're thinking about? Like, okay, operationally, if you really want to get into this, here's what you need to think about.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously the tracking piece, right? And so you need to be able to track how the customer's actually using it, things like paywalls, where companies don't even think about. They're like, oh, what is paywall, right? They're used to just giving everybody everything, and all of a sudden you have to think about, okay, how do you slowly start introducing more and more advanced features to a customer? And then there's this big elephant in the room, which is finance, like the operational side of finance. It's like now all of a sudden, if you're a PLG, you have to start thinking about, okay, so finance is very keen to traditional order forms and traditional, think of a B2B enterprise SaaS in which you have a sales team and they go out and do sales cycles. This is now very different, right? There's a velocity game to it. You have to be able to actually take transactional deals now. And so like the whole finance operations kind of shifts as well. And I think a lot of people just aren't prepared for that because they think it's all go to market and nothing, on the back end.
Ooh, that is a really good one because honestly, like even the beginnings, like that's not something that pops up in your mind. Is the finance operations piece of it. But it is important because the economics are different. What you're doing is very different, right?
Totally.
And I think that's really solid work. Mac, I got to ask you, man, because at K1, you probably have a mix of PLG and sales-led motions all the way throughout the portfolio, right? And I got to ask you, man, when companies come to you and they're like, Mac, we want to do PLG, what are you thinking? What are the first 2-3 things where you're like, your reaction to those type of requests?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think really good points on the operational side of things. I think one of the other things that you need to consider is, do you have that natural inclination of like a customer feedback loop? So as customers are kind of growing through the product, I think we think a lot about the customer acquisition side of PLG, but also the expansion side of PLG once a customer is actually using the product. Do you have that consistent kind of feedback loop with the customer to make sure that they're continuing to expand through the product and they're adopting even more of the product? And I think another big piece of that too is, do you have the customer community for something like this too, right? Like, do you have this environment with customers where they can talk about features, they can naturally kind of grow into the product and share their experiences with other customers, because that provides that rich source of just almost like resourcing, right? Like if you're thinking about the PLG model, reducing CAC, things like that, right? You're probably going to have less on the documentation side of things and whatnot. So you want to make sure that your customers are able to share their experiences and honestly give it more of that kind of community feeling than with some other products, which I think is really important. But I think it to reemphasize too, it really is, you focus on the acquisition side of the customer, but I think the expansion side is just as important.
Yeah, that expansion motion is, I think it's one of the biggest things they look for in a PLG, right? I think that's spot on, man. Like that again was a terrific call out. And I know you brought the specs today and the glasses, right? But this Clark Kent ain't fooling anybody. You are a Superman when it comes to pricing, right? Here's the big thing though. You said something really interesting about expansion and virality, community. I'm going back to Johnny in a second here, what he just said, and I'm going to invite Sam in a minute. But is PLG, I actually had somebody say this to me, is PLG really just giving away a bunch of free value, just giving it away, not even charging for it, and in the hopes and prayers that somebody will find it valuable enough to pay for? And that person actually went on to say, why don't you just give it all to them? Like say you have a bunch of feature functionality, all the premium advanced stuff, give it all to them. And just, if they love it, they'll buy it. And if they don't love it, you need to work harder. This is what he said. I'm almost quoting word for word. So how do you feel about that, drawing the line? Do you give it all away? Do you give away a certain amount that you think is the right amount? How do you know what that is?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's great, right? Because I've definitely heard that phrase before. It's just like, well, you're giving your product away. You need to think about how the kind of point of monetization. I think really when I think about PLG, and I'm so curious to hear the other guys' opinions on this too, is you really want to create those low barriers to entry. You want to make it easy for somebody to pick up the product, start using the product. And as I think about PLG, that's where my mind immediately goes. But you want to be able to let that customer find the value almost on their own, right? You're creating this pathway or this intuitive pathway for somebody to pick up the value all along the way without having to be kind of sold on what the value proposition of the product is. But you definitely shouldn't sacrifice, just because it's PLG, it doesn't mean you're delivering less value. It means you're creating a different journey for that user to discover the value along the way, which I think is important. And again, it goes back to that creating that feedback loop, you need the customers to be almost evangelizing the product too and selling the value as they're kind of adopting the product, making sure that your product has the low barriers to entry in the product experience that's going to help them find the value themselves.
Disagree, Johnny? Agree? What do you think?
No, I 100% agree. I actually add on top of that. And so one of the things here at ClickUp that we are so keen on is we call it the new user experience, right? At what point do they start seeing that value themselves? And we have milestones, like they come in and they had to be able to create a task, right? Because that's like the first milestone in which they're going to see the value. The second one is like they start inviting a user, which means like is that the next step. And so we have all of these steps to Mac's point in which we know they're going to get value out of this, and they have to get it quick. That's the other thing about PLG. They have to get it right away. If it takes them like 3-4 months, they're not even going to reach there, right? And so that's why like we almost have like a guided onboarding experience for them in which they hit those steps. And once we get them to like step 4 or 5, like we know we got them. And so, that's kind of to exactly the Mac's point.
Mind the milestones. I love that. You have to be really thoughtful about those different steps that they take. And I think if it's not a just throw a bunch of stuff at them and see what sticks, which is kind of what I think this person was suggesting. Yeah. But minding those milestones for that journey, for the ICP or the right customer you want in there, makes a ton of sense. Sam, I'm bringing you in because you're the, I don't know what, man, like freaking $3 billion a year juggernaut here, right? You guys got all sorts of motions. What is your take on PLG, man, especially for a company like yours that can really get into big enterprise and long sales cycles?
PLG is something we really, really looked at. So Snowflake has a very small PLG motion today. And part of it, as Johnny pointed out, part of it is the product itself is more complicated. It's not as easy to onboard. But there is a motion today where a customer can whip out their credit card and start going, and within 5 minutes can start using Snowflake. We look at PLG as a way to expand the long tail and also to sort of drive funnel into the sales led motion, right? So one of the challenge with a company like Snowflake, which is primarily sales led, is to figure out that handoff point, almost like where do you hand off the baton to the sales led side of things, and getting that right is something we're having a lot of active debate on today.
I think that's spot on, the long tailed approach, right? When you think about, you're not necessarily abandoning the sales led. I mean, that's who you are, right, in the center. But your ability to then capture others. You said it's like 5-minute swipe, you're in, and let that motion go. It's not a pivot or necessarily, it's just an expansion of what you're doing now. And that actually brings up really my final piece here before we move on to the next topic is this kind of PLG to SLG or product-led motion to sales-led motion, or some say, sales-assisted motion. I've heard all sorts of different variations of this. Is that kind of that fuzzy middle between product-led and sales-led. And Sam, when you guys were looking at this, how did you think about that transition, that handing over the baton?
Yeah, that's a great question. There are a couple of things. One is what we find is that there is an inherent conflict, right? So, for example, one of the things we're struggling with is as we think about extending the PLG motions up the, shall we call ACV, up the ACV bands, you are almost coming into conflict with your sales team because you're, a lot of times folks would think that, hey, you're kind of taking opportunity away from me, right? So how do you get the incentive right with the sales team, and also, but at the same time, create that incentive where if you do this right, it could really lower the cost of sale, in a way that's economically servable for this segment of customers. Another thing too that we try to think about is around pricing and discounting, right? So. You want the sales team to be able to offer compelling value to customers to make the commitment to deepen the relationship with you. So how do you do that? Pricing, discounting is a lever, but what are the other things that we can bring into the table as part of the sales, part of the customer success, part of the services and support organization to drive more incremental value beyond access to the product, access to additional features, access to someone to pick up the phone and talk to you.
Those are solid points all around. I think a SaaS operator could run to the bank with a lot of those, right? And team just all around, right? If I think about just making sure you have the right mechanics and milestones, right, Johnny, which you were saying, the feedback loops and that virality component of it, Mac, and then Sam with the So that incentives and making sure the right incentives are in place. I think those are really big, strong recommendations for anybody thinking about PLG. Thank you guys for this first one. I knew you were going to bring it. I knew it.
Everything around me. Cream, get the money. Dollar bill, yo. Cash rules everything